like I'm in A Few Good Men. Who ordered the code red? You ordered the code red. I think that Pete Hegseth clearly ordered the code red here. Yes. And I also think that that would be a war crime. And it's very clear. You speak to anybody from JAG, you speak to Senator, California Representative Ted Lieu, who's a former JAG officer. He has said this is a war crime. And the sad thing about it is, if you do follow an unlawful order and you're in the military, you can be court-martialed and you can be prosecuted and you can be put in jail.
Just like
He set up the military.
Yes.
He set it up. And I'm sorry, the buck stops with him.
Yes.
It's his job, whatever it's called, Department of Defense, War, Booty, whatever.
Can I tell you something? It's a department of lies, because I don't know why they don't just tell us that they want regime change in Venezuela instead of fabricating all of this
because
stuff.
This is a better distraction.
Because, yes, that's exactly right.
We didn't see any survivors, to be clear, after that first strike.
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war. This is what you in the press don't understand. You sit in your air-conditioned offices or up on Capitol Hill and you nitpick and you plant fake stories in the Washington Post about kill everybody, phrases on anonymous sources not based in anything, not based in any truth at all. And then you want to throw out really irresponsible terms about American heroes, about the judgment that they made. I wrote a whole book on this topic because of what politicians and the press does to warfighters. President Trump has empowered commanders to do what is necessary, which is dark and difficult things in the dead of night on behalf of the American people. We support them, and we will stop the poisoning of the American people.
And this is
you're going to have families be able to live without the fear of their son or daughter just having a pill to have a little fun and ending up dying within a period of 60 seconds, right? No, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let it continue to happen. What Biden did to this country by allowing all these people, and I call them animals in many cases, I think they're animals, to come into our country and destroy our country and let all those drugs pour in. Let people just walk across the border like it was nothing. You look at them, a lot of them, you know, you say, oh, let's not discriminate. I'm not talking about color. I'm just talking about you look into the eyes of some of these people. We're smart. And you see a killer. Come on in. Just come on in. 11,888 murderers. Many of them committed more than one murder. He allowed them into our country, totally unvetted, totally unchecked. But he also allowed drugs to come in at record numbers, and hundreds of thousands of people a year died.
And Hegseth has denied some of the comments that were reported by the Washington Post, and he says that he stands by the combat decisions of a military commander involved in the deadly strike on that suspected drug vessel. And he also says that we have just begun striking terrorists. Take a listen.
As I've said, and I'll say again, we've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco-terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations. And it's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs, we're striking the boats, we're defeating narco-terrorists.
Donald Trump joined in there supporting Pete Hegseth and added that plenty of drugs that were coming into America via the sea, they're now down significantly. Hegseth also went on to say that this is about deterrence, and of course it is. I mean, the amount of drug boats coming into America, they're slowing down. So what do you make of this? Obviously, Hegseth is being attacked. There's a lot of controversy around what the Trump administration is doing. Do the American people support this, or is this going to impact Trump politically?
No, they do support this, and what he said was all exactly correct. This is an issue that is afflicting this country, and by the way, this is not just a bunch of people trying to make money by selling drugs, right? This is actually more of a strategic thing by China, who is trying to create social upheaval in this country. A lot of these things that are used, the chemicals that are used for these drugs come from China. So this is a larger problem that we're facing. It's not just about making money and war on drugs like we had in like the 80s and 90s. This is really more of a, not just a tactical, but a strategic issue for us vis-a-vis China, South America, who are trying to degrade our way of life. They're trying to create a lot of issues for our country societally, which is exactly what they're doing.
Joining me is Donald Trump's first White House spokesman. Sean Spicer, good to see you. Look, you are a captain in the US Navy Reserve. Now, how comfortable are you with Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War, ordering a second strike on survivors hanging on to a burning boat in the Caribbean?
Well, first, I have to say any comments that I make are mine and mine alone and don't reflect those views of the Department of Defense, Department of War, or the Department of the Navy. That being said, Andrew, I will tell you, I've spoken to some very high up folks about this. Those reports that were reported by the Washington Post are very questionable at best. And I say that because the mere circumstance of a Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense in the past being in a position like that is just not an accurate understanding of how a decision like that would get made. That's just not normal for a Secretary of War to be in that kind of position that they'd be talking about a second strike. There is some questions, and some of the folks that I've talked to, if you actually parse what the Washington Post said, people are saying, well, they never actually accused the Secretary of saying that, which is kind of the point. There is some question, I think, rather, as to what someone may have interpreted his intent to be. But by every estimation of everyone I have talked to at fairly high levels, this is just not an accurate report from the Washington Post.
That said, it seems there was a second strike. I mean, the White House spokesman seemed to confirm it. Whoever ordered it, how do you feel about it?
So that's the question, right? And I say this because the nuance matters. So here's why that matters. If the commander who ordered that second strike knew that there were, unarmed civilians that had survived a strike, to fire on them specifically would be problematic. However, if the commander was doing something more broader, taking out an existential second threat of which they were collateral damage, that is a very different scenario. So the context of which the second strike was ordered does matter. And like I said, right now, we're hearing all of this through anonymous sources from the Washington Post. I think that what happened, who ordered it, why they ordered it, in the context will be critical to understanding whether or not this was some kind of real issue, or whether this was collateral damage. But there's a lot more to this than what initially met the eye.
Well, I agree that we need to know more details. But if the claim is correct, and it's a big if, as you're suggesting too, two survivors hanging off the side of a burning boat and they get hit again, that doesn't seem to me taking out someone who represents an existential threat.
Yeah, look, I've been in the room with the President of the United States during a strike, right? I can't go into obvious specific details, but I'm just telling you, the way the Washington Post portrayed this is not an actual representation of how a strike would go down in terms of the role of the secretary. And so I immediately question the accuracy of the reporting. The second question that you asked is really what needs to get further investigated. What caused a second strike? What was the intent of that second strike? What was the target of that second strike, and why was it ordered? But there's a big range in there that stem from a problematic answer that is, well, they were taking out survivors of the first strike, to there was collateral issues that needed to be addressed in a second strike, and they were just further damaged. Those are very, very different scenarios that have a big different impact on how we view this situation. So I like I said, just the mere initial reporting from the Washington Post gave me pause.
I think you're correct to raise a red flag there. I mean, is the Secretary of War really standing by the shoulder of the person pushing the buttons, saying, no, go again? I doubt that too. Donald Trump seems to be threatening war on Venezuela. He's got a naval force off its coast. He's told airlines to consider the airspace over Venezuela closed. He's reportedly told Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro in a phone call to flee with his family. What is going on and why?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions there, right? Why? I mean, first of all, I look back at what Donald Trump has done specifically in Iran, right? Everybody had this view about what you could and could not do. And I think the way the president approached striking those Iran nuclear capabilities was something that wasn't one extreme or the other, as everybody had predicted. Donald Trump found a third way, a way to achieve America's national interest without dragging us into something. So the question I ask now is this part of a broader strategy? Make Maduro understand that the U.S. is willing to take action if he doesn't flee, right? That he is a bad, bad guy. He is allowing drugs to flow freely into the United States and a lot of other places. And so if Donald Trump can find a way to triangulate a new strategy that rids the Venezuelan people of a bad, bad person and helps us stop the flow of illegal drugs into our country, then that's a good thing. So if Maduro believes that there's a possibility that he or his family could be attacked or that there could be regime change, and that causes him to take action, I'm all for it.
Is it just about the drugs? Well, when I say just, I think you know what I mean. The drugs flowing into America, or is there some wider geopolitical strategy at play here?
That's actually a great question. I think the drugs are obviously a big problem, a big threat to the United States. But to your point, there's definitely a China and Russia influence in Venezuela, a struggle, if you will, to see who gets to dominate that area and a foothold for those countries in sort of our southern region. So I do think there is a much bigger geopolitical issue at stake, as you raise, because of concerns of the influence of China and Russia. And so if we can be very clear that we will protect our interests, both in terms of the flow of drugs and our geopolitical interests, that's obviously a big win for the United States.
Sean Spicer, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You bet, Andrew.